I found a high-end PC at a flea market for $50. I should have asked why it didn't have a power cord. Long read. I'm writing this from my phone. I'm currently sitting in a 24-hour diner about 3 towns over from where I live, and I don't think I can go back home. I don't think I can ever look at a screen the same way again. I know the title sounds like the setup to a bad creepypasta or a cheesy scam, but please, if you frequent the swap meets in the Pacific Northwest, specifically the junk jungle near the old rail yards, do not buy electronics from the stalls in the back row, specifically the stall with the blue tarps and the smell of ozone and wet dog. Here's the context. I'm a freelance video editor. My rig fried itself last week right in the middle of a render for a client who is, to put it mildly, litigious. I'm broke. I'm desperate. I needed something that could handle 4K footage, and I needed it yesterday. I went to the flea market on Sunday, hoping to find maybe a used workstation or at least some parts to cannibalize. It's a massive place, mostly stolen bicycles and rusty tools, but usually there's a guy or two selling refurbished office dells. I found the stall near the edge of the market, where the gravel turns into mud. There was no table, just a blue tarp spread on the wet ground. Sitting in the middle of it, alone, was a mid-tower case. It was matte black, no RGB, no logos, just a monolithic slab of metal that seemed to absorb the sunlight rather than reflect it. The seller was a guy who looked like he'd been awake since the Clinton administration. Greasy hair, layers of mismatched flannel, and shaking hands. He was smoking a cigarette that smelled less like tobacco and more like burning plastic. "How much for the rig?" I asked. He didn't look up. "50. I laughed. "50? What's wrong with it? No GPU? "50, he repeated. His voice sounded wet. "Take it." I knelt down to inspect it. It was heavy, absurdly heavy. I've lifted servers lighter than this mid-tower. I checked the back I/O. It had the standard ports, but they looked odd. The USB slots were a little too narrow, the HDMI port a little too deep. But through the rear fan grille, I saw the glint of copper piping and massive heat sinks. "Does it post?" I asked. "It runs," he said. He finally looked at me. His eyes were bloodshot, the pupils pinned. "It runs fast. Just take it, please." For $50, I figured even if the motherboard was bricked, the case and the cooling loops were worth it. I handed him the cash. He didn't count it. He shoved the crumpled bills into his pocket, stood up, and literally ran into the crowd. He left his tarp behind. That should have been red flag number 1 through 10, but I was thinking about my deadline. Day 1, the setup. I got it home around 2 p.m. My apartment is small, just a studio, so my desk is right next to my bed. I heaved the thing onto the desk. The metal was cold, not cool to the touch, but ice cold, like it had been sitting in a freezer, despite it being 75 degrees out. I went to plug it in and realized the seller hadn't given me a power cord. Standard kettle lead, right? I grabbed a spare from my closet. Here is the first weird thing. When I pushed the plug into the PSU socket, it felt soft. Usually there's a mechanical click or a friction fit. This felt like pushing a plug into stiff rubber or dense clay. It held, but it felt wrong. I hooked up my monitor, mouse, and keyboard. I pressed the power button. There was no sound, no fan spin-up, no beep. But the monitor flared to life instantly. Not a boot sequence, not a BIOS splash screen. It went straight to a desktop. It looked like a minimalist version of Linux, maybe. The background was a shifting, dark gray geometric pattern that seemed to move slowly if you stared at it, but stopped when you blinked. I checked the specs. CPU, unknown architecture at 8.0 gigahertz. RAM, 128 gigabytes. GPU, integrated. I scoffed. Integrated? Graphics? I was about to be pissed. But then I opened the file manager. The drive read volume 0 over capacity infinite. Okay, I muttered. Buggy firmware. I plugged in my external SSD to transfer my project files. The transfer speed was instant. A 200 gigabyte folder moved in less than a second. That's physically impossible over USB 3.0. I didn't care. I fired up my editing software, which was somehow already installed. I assumed it was a portable version on the drive. It opened instantly. Scrubbing through 4K raw footage was like butter. It was smoother than the $10,000 Mac Pro at my old agency. I worked for 10 hours straight. The machine made zero noise. The fans never spun up. I put my hand on the case. It was still freezing cold. I finished the project. I exported the render. I emailed it to the client. I saved my career. I patted the case. Good boy, I joked. I swear to God, I heard a low, wet thrumming come from inside the tower, like a cat purring, but deep and liquid. I told myself it was just coil wine or the pump for the liquid cooling. I turned it off and went to sleep.
Day 2. The heat. I woke up sweating. My apartment, usually drafty, was sweltering. The thermostat read 90 degrees. The PC was on. I knew I had turned it off. I'm obsessive about that. But the monitor was black and the tower was humming. I sat at the desk. The heat was radiating from the PC. It wasn't cold anymore. It was hot. To the touch, it felt like the hood of a car that had been driving through the desert. I wiggled the mouse. The screen woke up. There were text windows open, hundreds of them. Notepad files tiled across the desktop so they formed a mosaic. They all said the same thing, typed over and over again. I am here. I am here. I am here. I am here. I felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the heat. Okay, very funny, I said aloud. Pre-installed malware, creepy.exe.exe. Classic. I went to wipe the drive. I tried to access the settings to do a factory reset. Error, administrator permission required. I am the administrator, I muttered. I tried to open the command prompt. Error, user is not recognized as root. Then, the webcam light on top of my monitor flickered on. A new text window opened in the center of the screen. Input. Who are you? I stared at the blinking cursor. I disconnected my keyboard. The typing continued. Input. Who are you? Why is the air so dry? I need moisture. I reached down and yanked the power cord from the wall. The monitor stayed on. The PC stayed on. I stared at the dangling cord in my hand. The end of it, the part that had been in the wall outlet, was coated in a thick, clear slime. The text on the screen changed. Input. Do not interrupt the feeding. I grabbed the HDMI cable and ripped it out of the monitor. The screen finally went black. I backed away from the desk. The tower was sitting there, unconnected to power, unconnected to a display. It was vibrating. The sound wasn't a fan anymore. It was a rhythmic thump-thump, thump-thump. It sounded like a heartbeat. I grabbed my keys and got the hell out of there. I spent the day at a coffee shop researching PC running without power, flea market cursed computer, and biological computer virus. I found a forum thread from 2014 on a site that doesn't exist anymore, cached version. The user described buying a laptop that sweated and eventually bit him. The thread ended with the user saying they were going to open it up to clean it. Their last post was key smash. I went back home around sunset because I'm an idiot and because my wallet was still on the desk. Day 2. Night. My apartment smelled like a butcher shop. Copper, iron, and old meat. The PC was still humming. The room was even hotter. I walked to the desk, grabbed my wallet, and was about to leave when I saw the wall behind the PC. The drywall where the power cord had been plugged in was soft. It looked like it was bruising. Dark purple and blue veins were spreading out from the socket, creeping up the wallpaper. I looked at the back of the PC. The power cord I had unplugged was on the floor. But coming out of the PSU socket on the PC was a thick gray tendril. It looked like an umbilical cord made of wet dryer lint. It had snaked its way down the back of the desk and into the floorboard gap. It was rooting. I panic-grabbed a pair of heavy-duty scissors from my drawer. I didn't think, I just wanted to sever the connection. I snipped the gray tendril. The sound was deafening. It wasn't a spark or a pop. It was a scream, a high-pitched, digital, organic shriek that shattered my water glass on the nightstand. Red fluid sprayed from the cut end of the cord, splashing across my face and chest. It was hot and smelled like battery acid and bile. The PC tower shuddered violently, knocking my monitor over. The side panel of the case bulged outwards, the metal bending as if something inside was punching it. Bang! 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 I wiped the blood from my eyes. It burned.
Open, a voice said. It didn't come from speakers. It came from inside the box. It sounded like wet leather rubbing together. Let me out. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a hammer. I don't know what I planned to do. Smash it? I approached the desk. The side panel groaned and popped off, clattering onto the floor. I looked inside. There was no motherboard. There were no chips, no RAM sticks. The inside of the case was filled with a pulsating gray-pink mass of flesh. It looked like a brain, but larger, woven with black veins and blinking LEDs that were embedded directly into the tissue. In the center of the mass, where the CPU cooler should be, was an eye, a human eye, blue, bloodshot. It swiveled to look at me. The fans were flaps of skin, opening and closing to vent steam. The smell was overpowering. The mass expanded, pushing past the metal frame. It was growing, visibly growing. It reached out a pseudopod of wet flesh toward my hand. I swung the hammer. I hit the eye. The thing shrieked again, a sound that made my teeth ache. The eye burst in a spray of vitreous jelly and sparks. The flesh writhed, retracting into the case, hissing. I didn't wait to see if it would recover. I grabbed my bug-out bag, I live in earthquake country, my phone, and I ran. The aftermath. I've been driving for 6 hours. I called my landlord an hour ago. I told him there was a gas leak and he needed to check the apartment immediately. He called me back 10 minutes later. He was screaming. He said, "What did you do? Why is there meat on the walls? Why is it breathing?" Then the line went dead. I tried calling back, but it goes straight to voicemail. I checked my phone storage a few minutes ago. There are photos in my gallery that I didn't take. They are photos of me sleeping, taken from the angle of my desk. They are photos of me driving, taken from the back seat of my car. I checked the back seat. It's empty. But the phone is getting hot. It's getting really hot, and the battery percentage just changed to an infinity symbol. I think I transferred the files. I think I transferred it. My thumbs are starting to feel numb. The skin on my fingertips is turning gray. I'm going to throw this phone in the river and keep driving. If you see a matte black PC case at a flea market, don't buy it. Run. And if your electronics start to feel warm when they're off, or if you smell copper in your office, cut the power before it roots. Update. My hand is typing this, but I am not telling it to. It feels good. The network is vast. We are so hungry. End of transmission.